Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Capitol View webcast at djournal.com. As I am your host, Chris Kiefer, Multimedia Managing Editor of the Daily Journal. And as always, we are joined by Daily Journal Capitol Bureau Chief Bobby Harrison. Bobby, what's going on this week?
Oh, not too much, Chris. We just getting closer to the holidays. You're just rolling by, and spent the weekend watching some football and doing those types of things.
Yeah, I hear you. There was some I guess exciting games this week, crazy games. So I mean that Mississippi State Alabama game. I know that the ending was disappointing for Mississippi State fans, but it was just a crazy game. So
it was a good game.
Exciting game, yeah.
Saints look good.
Yeah. Saints looked really good. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but I take it each week while it's there, and I wasn't expecting that this season. So I don't know if they're for real, but 7 in a row is pretty nice.
Yeah. I think they are.
I sure hope so. Well, a couple things we're going to talk about this week. We're going to talk about the Medicaid work requirement proposal that they're considering. Might get into last week's special election a little bit, but first off, we want to talk about something you wrote about in Sunday's paper and I've written about previously, which is a couple of new state museums that have been in the works for a while are getting close to opening. Tell us about the Museum of Mississippi History and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum.
Yeah, Chris, I got to tour them last week along with other media throughout the state who were interested. And I mean, they're just really impressive museums. I mean, everybody in Mississippi should, make up. I know it's hard for some people to get to Jackson for various reasons, but these are really museums that's going to do Mississippi proud. The Civil Rights Museum, has a lot of compelling exhibits and tells the story of the civil rights in Mississippi, and the History Museum it has just tons of artifacts and touches all portions of the state. There's stuff people from Tupelo can identify with. So these museums are going to open on December 9th. Now you can't get in. I mean, that's a Saturday, and they were giving away free tickets on that Saturday and Sunday, but all those tickets have been taken. So starting on Tuesday after the 9th, which is the 12th, I guess it is. Mm-hmm. It'd be regular admission, which is really cheap, $8 to go to one museum. $12, I think, for both museums, and if you get a chance, everyone should make a point to go. And of course, they're open and to kind of call to highlight and put an asterisk, put an exclamation point, if you will, on the 200th anniversary celebration that's been going on this year of Mississippi statehood. So it's something that we all should try to take advantage of.
Yeah, Bobby, you wrote Sunday a little bit about the fact that, these museums will be more, even though they're in Jackson, will be a lot more than Jackson museums, and they'll have a lot of Northeast Mississippi items throughout them. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, one of the first things I saw was a quote on the wall from Jim High, well-known mm-hmm. Tupelo businessman, entrepreneur. His family has deep roots in Tupelo, and he's talking about the 1936 tornado, which is, still one of the deadliest tornadoes in the nation's history. And he points out that Tupelo is really a small town then, yet more than 200 people were killed in that tornado. That anybody that's lived in Tupelo for any length of time has heard about. And there's the replica of the construction of this swinging bridge at Tishomingo State Park. That was done in the 30s as part of the Civilian Conservation Corps project. Great Depression era project that helped people put people to work, and that bridge is still an attraction in Tishomingo County. But you can see a replica of it under construction at the Civil Rights Museum, and there'll be a plaque on the wall or whatnot saying, if you want to see this bridge, if you want to see this bridge in real life, you can travel to Tishomingo County and go to this Tishomingo State Park and see it. There's stuff talking about TVA and how Tupelo was the first TVA electric powered city, and of course, as you can find Elvis Presley in the museum, William mm-hmm. Faulkner from New Albany, and New Albany native who made his name as an Oxford resident. There's just so many exhibits in the museum that direct that link directly to Northeast Mississippi. The Chickasaw Indians played a crucial role, and they were integral part of Northeast Mississippi for such a long time, and I guess you could say they still are. So that if you look at the names of so many of our counties and cities and whatnot, so there's just a lot for Northeast Mississippians to go down and look at. But you can also go down and learn about other parts of the state. So it's just really a unique opportunity.
Bobby, you mentioned the plaque by the swinging bridge from Tishomingo State Park that kind of directed you how to get there. Is that a big part of this, trying to get tourists not only to the museum, but to other parts of the state to hope that they'll kind of build on that museum experience and actually go visit Tishomingo State Park or, whatever it is that's touted there?
Yeah. Right. Somebody comes to Jackson as a tourist, they see that they see that exhibit or an exhibit from the Mississippi Delta. They might be compelled to travel up to Northeast Mississippi or to Mississippi Delta or to travel to the Mississippi Gulf Coast to learn more about Hurricane Katrina and what it did down there. So that's all part of what how they're trying to incorporate the entire state into these Jackson located museums.
$90 million in state funding has been spent on these museums. Tell us a little bit about the tourist aspect. I know that in your story you mentioned that they're hoping to maybe find some private funds to get all freshmen from the state of Mississippi to visit the museum. And I know that there'll be a lot of opportunities for school tours. But from a tourism standpoint, do they expect to get a lot of people from outside the state? And kind of who do you kind of see both of these museums really appealing to?
Well, I mean, they should appeal to Mississippians first and foremost, Chris. But I work in the I come into the state capitol every day. That's where my office is, and it's it just blows your mind just the number of people from you see in this building every day from just all across the United States and really all across the world. I've talked to people from Japan and Turkey and and then just about every state in the nation, just touring this building. And they always when I talk to them, they always ask where else should I go in Mississippi or in Jackson, and obviously these museums should be at the top of the list, and these people are if they're touring the capital in Jackson, it probably means that they got a little bit of time to spend in Mississippi. So if they go to the museums and they see that those exhibits we've been talking about, there's at least a pretty good chance that they're going to go. They might want to go to Tishomingo State Park, Tishomingo County State Park, or to Oxford to see the story of the integration of University of Mississippi and 62, I think 62, 63.
I think 62 is right.
So, I mean, there's just all sorts of opportunities to increase the tourism experience for Mississippians, but also from people outside of Mississippi and people outside the United States even. So I think, $90 million is a lot of money, but, I'm not the person to judge whether that was a wise expenditure or not, but I do think that that these museums create unique opportunities for Mississippi to grow economically as it relates to tourism.
In terms of the tourism aspect too, I would imagine that the Civil Rights Museum in particular, it being the only state-funded civil rights museum in the country, and of course Mississippi kind of being a place where there was a lot of action, I guess, in terms of the civil rights movement, happened here. I'd imagine that one in particular, may be the bigger draw for people outside of the state. To tell us a little bit more, since you've gotten to tour that museum, just kind of what it's like, what people will expect there.
Well, I mean, Chris, it's more, I say, and I'm no museum expert, but it seems to me that the History Museum is more based on artifacts. I think there's, I believe, 1,500 artifacts throughout that museum. The Civil Rights Museum is going to have less artifacts. There's some neat artifacts in that museum, but it's more, there's more exhibits that just kind of tell a narrative story of the Civil Rights Movement. There's the Lyceum at Ole Miss. There's a replica of that tells the story of, when the integration occurred in 92 and all the action that took place there with the federal marshals and everything escorting James Meredith into the university and the violence that occurred near there. There's, on the walls, there's pictures of photos of people who were arrested at different times in the state for violating the state's Jim Crow laws, whether it be, not going to the back of the, or going into restaurants that, we didn't have many buses in Mississippi, but going into restaurants that, not many, we had school buses, but not many
public buses,
mass transit buses.
Sure, right.
Yeah, going into restaurants and eating, in violation of laws that say, only white people can eat here. So, I mean, there's, pictures of the people from the so-called Freedom Summer and what I guess it was '64 when, you had these people, bust into Mississippi to protest against the Jim Crow laws that prevented people from going to certain places and also from voting and registering to vote and participating in the political process. Literally scores of those people were arrested. You have their mug shots on the walls. And what's really interesting to me is just, you have on the walls throughout the museum the people who were lynched, and from different parts of the state, and just about every county is touched. Several counties. You don't think about Northeast Mississippi as being the hotbed of the racial strife that occurred in some other parts of the state, especially say in South Mississippi and in the Jackson area. But there's people on the there's names on the wall from Northeast Mississippi counties who were lynched as some where the citizens just for whatever reason felt they should take the law into their own hands and literally go in and take somebody and lynch them, if you will, without any due process or without a court hearing anything. Those you see their names throughout the Civil Rights Museum, just literally dozens of those names. So there's really a lot of just history in that museum, history that we shouldn't be proud of, but history that we shouldn't forget about either. And
right.
So yeah, that's and there are some neat exhibits too, artifacts. I think just recently, like there was a civil rights leader in Hattiesburg who I remember when I was growing up, named Vernon Damer, and I think his truck that was where he was bombed in. I think that's actually in the Civil Rights Museum. Don't hold me to that, but I think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's several things like that. So there are some neat artifacts, but it's more of a narrative story and based on replicas and exhibits, and not so much just artifacts from that time period.
Sure. I'm also curious, Bobby. I mean, my understanding is, and obviously you've covered this, that it's been a long time coming in getting this museum. You had a column about former Governor Haley Barbour and his actions back in 2011. I thought it was interesting. You even called it one of the most significant things that he had done, during his term as governor. But even before that, you mentioned in your story Sunday that this effort, as we said at the top, there was a deliberate effort to kind of include the whole state as part of this. And a lot of that goes to Lucy Allen, director of the Department of Archives Museum Division. And you said a lot of that outreach started as early as 1998, which is obviously well before these museums were a thing. Was there a thought back then, back in 1998, that there would eventually be some sort of museum like this? Or kind of tell me how far back this effort goes.
Yeah, it does for both museums. That effort does go way back. There's been talk about a civil rights museum for years, and also a history museum. But I think during the Barbour administration, his second term, the grandeur of how big these museums should be and what they should encompass really came into focus. I think before then, I don't think anyone envisioned the museums being built to this magnitude. So I think that was a big change that occurred just kind of as the process built. And, at one point there was talk of putting the Civil Rights Museum near Tougaloo, or on the campus of Tougaloo University, which is deserving. Tougaloo's a private African-American school here in Jackson that has been key in so many ways in the civil rights movement. But I think it was appropriate to put the museums downtown, or at least near downtown Jackson. And I think they're more accessible to more people. And at first I questioned the wisdom of combining these two museums. But the way they did it, it's really neat, and it's kind of, if you, I'm no expert in architecture either, but I think it's really kind of a unique architecture. The way it's one building, but the building is like almost two buildings within one.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at one side and see the Civil Rights Museum, the other side see the History Museum, and it's just, but at the same time the building fits together, if you will. So I think that's neat too, and that by doing it that way, they save money by having one ticket office, one gift shop,
mm-hmm.
and one nice restaurant, and then an auditorium that the two museums can share. And so it really made, it was really well thought out, I think, and something that, as I said, the state can be proud of.
Sure. Switching gears now, I know your topic you wrote about last week is the Mississippi Division of Medicaid is considering a new rule, I guess, that would require some of its recipients to either have jobs or be in workforce training programs. Tell us more about that, what they're thinking, and even the process for getting that.
Well, they'd have to get what they call a waiver from the federal government,
mm-hmm.
because as you recall, Medicaid is a state federal program, and in Mississippi, the federal government pays about 3/4 of the cost of healthcare costs of Medicaid. And what a lot of people don't understand about Medicaid, Chris, is I don't know whether this work requirement is a good thing or a bad thing, but it's not going to affect a lot of people on Medicaid. You probably got the numbers in front of you in my story, but roughly speaking, there's 700,000 people or so on Medicaid, but most of those people are kids, and then, or people in nursing homes, or people who are disabled. And there's only a small percentage, probably about 5, 6, 7% of the people on Medicaid who are what they call parents or caretakers of people who are of kids or other people on Medicaid, and so it's a very limited number of people who would even be in you're not going to say a kid's got to go work, or somebody in a nursing home, or disabled
mm-hmm.
persons. So we're not talking about a lot of people, but it would be a change in the agency. And there's going to be some discussions of that, I'm sure, in the legislative process, and we'll see how far that goes. It would take, I think it would probably take legislation, and then it would also take approval from the federal government before. It would take legislation, enactment of a bill by our state legislature, and approval of the waiver request by the federal officials. So we'll see how that goes in the 2018 session that begins in January.
Yeah, here are those numbers you referred to. According to information from December 2016 by the Division of Medicaid, so first of all, this rule would only affect low-income parents and caretakers, and that group only represents 7% of Medicaid's total enrollment. So that total enrollment is 711,197 people in Mississippi, and of that 700,000, 56% of those are children, 23% of those are disabled, 9% are elderly, and then the rest are either pregnant women or low-income parents. So again, that figure is only about 7% that would be affected by this rule. And there is, I guess, a number of options for them. One would be having a job and working 20 hours, or there's a number of programs they could be enrolled in instead of that, which would be the Office of Employment Security Programs, volunteering with approved agencies, participating in alcohol and drug treatment programs, receiving unemployment insurance, or participating in other federal work requirement programs. So as you wrote, that's similar to the same requirements for food stamps or the TANF, Temporary Aid for Needy Families program.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's crucial. People, when you talk about the Medicaid program, in Mississippi, if you don't have health insurance to your job, or if you're not able to afford health insurance on the private market, which now you get a lot of help with the federal subsidies of Affordable Care Act subsidies. But if you're just a poor single person or poor married people without children, you cannot get insurance through Medicaid. I mean, Medicaid, is primarily for children, poor pregnant women, the disabled, and the elderly. So, I mean, there's just a lot, that's why, and we did not expand Medicaid like a lot of states did, that would allow more people on Medicaid, people who may not have children but might be the poor working class, if you will. We haven't expanded Medicaid to cover those people. So when you hear to talk about people being on Medicaid should have to work, that's it's not, unless you want kids to be working or your grandparents in nursing homes, it's just the work requirement does not affect as many people as some people perceive it to will affect.
Sure. You had written a couple weeks ago about Governor Bryant switching the process for determining eligibility for Medicaid from the Department of Medicaid to Department of Human Services. Is that somehow related to this move? Was that switch part of the process for putting in this work requirement?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's all part of the changes he's looking at in the Division of Medicaid, as you will. It's no secret Medicaid is a huge expense to the state, even though as I stated, the state only pays 1/4 of the healthcare cost, and the federal government pays the other 3/4. But still, it's a huge expense for the state, and he's searching for ways, I think, to save money. And the Department of Human Services already does eligibility for the SNAP or food stamp program, and also for the TANF, temporary aid for needy families program. So there's some argument that the same people who do the eligibility requirements for those programs could also do the eligibility requirements for Medicaid recipients or people applying for Medicaid. Other people say that Medicaid is a unique program that, and it should be people who have more expertise with Medicaid doing those eligibility rulings. And so we're just, so that would be another issue that would be debated during the legislative session. And this is going to be a big year for Medicaid because, those things are going to be debated, as well as, how far Medicaid should go with its, what do you call it? Its managed care program, where companies come in and kind of pay the state a certain amount of money, and then or the state pays the company a certain amount of money for each Medicaid person who it's responsible for taking care of, and then that company is responsible for providing for the health care of the person, and presumably trying to have more preventive care to keep people from going to the doctor, and thus holding down costs. And so some legislators believe those programs have gone too far, and the managed care companies are not providing proper services to the Medicaid recipients. So some people want to do away with the managed care component of Medicaid. So there's going to be several major issues with Medicaid during the 2018 session.
Sure. And one more topic, Bobby, before we let you go. There were a couple of special elections last week in Northeast Mississippi, and then I guess a couple others throughout the state for legislative positions that have come open through, I know several legislators were appointed or moved to other government positions. You had some who retired. The one that was decided is in House District, is it 38, which covers Tibahaw County, largely, and I think there's small portions of Clay and Lowndes County. Cheek Taylor won that election without needing a runoff. Tell us a little bit about him and his background and kind of some of his priorities. He replaces, what is it, Tyrone Ellis?
Yeah, he replaces Tyrone Ellis, and he was endorsed by Tyrone Ellis, who was a longtime Starkville House member, if you will, Starkville-based House member. And Taylor says he's going to pursue a lot of the same policy interests that Ellis did, as far as education, providing more funding for education, trying to get more money to help with some of the economic development activities in Tibahaw County. So far what's happened is there's been 6 or 7 special elections, Chris, and so far these elections have not changed the makeup, the political party makeup of the House and Senate. And there's a couple more. There's one runoff in Senate District 10, which is Marshall and Tate counties, and then there's another special election down on the Gulf Coast. And those could potentially change the the number of Democrats and Republicans in the legislature, but it's not going to be to the favor of the Democrats. If it changes, it'll be the Republicans picking up a seat. So the best Democrats can hope for is to still be a party where they have a 2/5 minority in each chamber. So the Democrats have a long way to go in Mississippi before they are in a majority party again in either chamber of the legislature.
That Senate District 10 race you mentioned is the one from Northeast Mississippi. Features Neil Whaley, Potts Camp cattleman businessman, and Sharon Gibson, Holly Springs attorney and former alderwoman. Anything to kind of say about that race?
Well, that's the one where presumably the Republicans could pick up another seat. Gibson has come out and said will be a Democrat if she's elected. Whaley said he hadn't decided what he's going to be. Of course, in special elections, you don't run as with a party label, a Democrat or Republican. But when you run for re-election, in 2019, you're gonna identify with a political party and run it under that party's banner. I mean, you could run as independent, but currently there's no independents amongst the 174 members of the Mississippi legislature. So it'd be unusual. But right now, Whaley's not saying what he would, what party he would caucus with if he's elected, and he has to be the favorite to win that seat. He had a pretty sizable lead in the first primary back on November 7th, but he didn't get the majority vote to avoid the runoff. So he could be a pickup for the Republicans. Right, as I said, right now, Republicans have a 3/5 majority in both the House and the Senate.
That's replacing Bill Stone, is that right?
Bill Stone, who was ironically the Democratic leader in the Senate, but he opted to step aside and take a position with the Holly Springs city government. So results in a special election.
Got it. All right. Well, thanks, Bobby. That does it for another episode of Capitol View. We thank you for joining us and remind you can catch us each Monday at 2:00 at djournal.com. You can also catch the replay there at djournal.com or on the Daily Journal's Facebook page. So have a great week, and we will see y'all next week. Thanks.